It's been a while since I've done some middle of nowhere stories. You guys have been requesting them, and luckily enough of you guys sent in some pretty good stories. These stories are claimed to be true by the people who sent them in, but at the end of the day, it is up to you to decide whether you believe them or not. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, be sure to submit it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that keep these videos going. Now, let's get into these middle of nowhere stories that will surely freak you out. One night in Puerto Rico back in the 1990s, I was driving back from a concert with a friend. We were along a winding, lonely mountain road at around 2 a.m. with no other cars, and it was super dark. We were both listening to music, smoking cigarettes, talking, etc., when suddenly, I spotted headlights in the rearview mirror. There was a car behind us, and it sped up until it was almost bumper to bumper with me, then switched its lights off. The vehicle then slowed down, let us move a bit ahead, and switched its lights back on, and once again sped up almost at our bumper, before switching the lights back off. It repeated this process for a while, and my friend and I were terrified. The first thing we thought was that we were getting carjacked or robbed. I sped up, but the other car sped up and kept pace. All this time we were just on full-on panic mode. Just about the time we believed we couldn't take it anymore, the car passed us, swerved, and blocked the road in front of us. It was a white sedan. My guess is a Nissan. We hit the brakes and figured we were about to get robbed, killed, or maybe even both. We sat there, panicking, and decided we were going to quickly hit reverse for a distance, then stop, run out of the car into the woods, and just let them take my car and hope we lose them. Probably not the best idea in hindsight, but we were not thinking clearly, and if they wanted the car, then I wasn't about to lose my life over it. Just as we were about to do it, the car straightened itself back onto the lane again, stood there for about 10 seconds or so, and drove off in a speed that I can only describe as someone hitting fast forward on a video. It was so fast, it was almost like a blur. It looked totally unreal, almost animated. We sat there for a few minutes, in total silence, before I decided just to get home since our town was about 15 to 20 minutes away. There were tight curves up that road ahead, which the car couldn't have driven that speed through. There's no way. So we wondered if it was some sort of ghost car. There have been tons of accidents and deaths on these roads, so I wouldn't be surprised. What do you guys think? Comment down below. So this is something that I've kept to myself for 2 years now, and every time I think about it, the hair all over my body still stands up. Here's some context. My girlfriend and I really liked to try to find new hikes in western Colorado. We decided to try a new trail that was not on the national monument and was way away from another trail. The trail was a good deal out of town as well. Anyways, we were one of the only cars parked at the trailhead, and as we were walking it quickly got dark. We made it all the way until the moon rose, and I stopped to hug my girlfriend and have a sort of romantic moment. All of a sudden, further down the trail, at least a few miles or so, we hear automatic gunfire, then silence for a couple of seconds before another set of shots. Now, this is kind of a normal thing for my area. Even though it was not public land, I knew a lot of buddies who would go out to the many forgotten trails to shoot and not get caught. My girlfriend asked me if I thought there were gunshots, and I told her that I couldn't think of anything else in the middle of this wilderness that it could be. We decided it would be best to turn back around, but we were already about 2 miles down the trail at this point, and at the top of a very large hill covered in desert shrubs. As soon as we stopped talking, we realized something was wrong. All of the insects had stopped chirping despite the fact that there had been dozens of crickets the entire hike up. Also, All of the sounds of nature completely stopped. My girlfriend was facing down the trail, and I was facing back away the way we came, ready to turn back. She looks behind me, and then screams and starts to run. I was already scared out of my mind, but I figured the worst it could be is some drunk redneck about to give us some trouble. I turned and looked where she was looking, and I immediately ran after her. I have never run so fast in my life. The shrubs were about 2 to 3 feet high in varying spots, and when I turned around, I don't know how to describe it, but it looked like a shadow. Even with the moonlight directly shining on it, it was almost an absence of light. It was already slowly standing up when I turned around. As soon as it fully rose up, I realized what I was looking at, and it had to be at least a foot taller than me. It had a very skin and bones figure to it. It was not human. We sprinted back to my car, still with nature silent the whole way. I was in such a hurry when we ran to my car that neither of us noticed I hadn't taken out my keys to unlock the car. We were halfway through the drive home when we realized that. Every single hair on my body was raised, and if I'm being honest, I never felt anything like that. Every fiber of my being screamed to run, and I was almost paralyzed by the fear that washed over me. Does anyone have any idea what it could have been? If so, please comment down below letting me know. And thank you, Swamp Dweller, for letting me share my story. It really has helped me. So I grew up in a small town out in the woods and swamps of Mississippi. As a kid, I would spend most of my time exploring the woods and wandering quite far into them, and I never had any bad or scary experiences out there. I would usually bring my golden retriever with me as well, and he was the sweetest dog I have ever met. Never barked or growled at anyone or anything, and thought everybody and every animal was there to play with him. I was about 12 or 13 at the time, and though I do have a vivid imagination, I've always been a rational thinker with a level head. My backyard and probably 40 feet of open space before it ran into the woods. Looking out on my full glass back door, it looked straight into the woods, and we had a large garage off to the right, a short distance that backed up to the trees with a small path behind it. The way our driveway was set up, cars could pull up to the right side of the house, and there would be a small strip of trees visible to them. The first time I knew something was off was one night when my golden retriever was growling at the back door. Hackles slightly raised. I didn't feel anything at the time, but it was slightly unnerving seeing him growl like that. I let him outside and he sniffed around a bit and then came back in and just stood at the door, watching. I shrugged it off and continued with my night. This happened for 2 more nights, where he would stand at the back door growling and barking occasionally, and I ignored it until that 3rd night. That night, I walked to the back door and froze. Something was watching me. I don't know how, but somehow I could just feel its gaze on my skin, and all the hair on my neck and arms stood on end. My dog was particularly aggressive, snarling and barking at the door with his hackles raised. I tried looking outside for anything, but it was too dark. I couldn't see anything. That said, I turned on the floodlights on the back of the house. I flipped them on, and nothing in the yard was there. The beams were pointed all the way out to the tree line as well, so I had a pretty good view. That said, I knew something was there because I kept focusing in one point in the trees that just felt wrong. Like it was where I was being watched from. I cautiously opened the door and my dog ran out into the yard, snarling and barking at some point. At the same time, I was watching, but he wouldn't go within 20 feet of it. I called him back and he didn't turn around. My dog slowly backed all the way to the house without turning his back to that spot. I was terrified. I've never felt such a palpable fear or dread in my life. I wanted to run and hide just off of how intense this feeling was. I let him back in and locked the door. I flipped the lights off, and when I went to turn away, That's when it happened. My mother pulled into the driveway, and her headlights hit the section of trees my dog was going ballistic at. And then I saw it. It was standing at the edge of the tree line, directly where I was looking. A human shape, but pitch black and tall. Impossibly tall. Easily as tall as the garage. I couldn't see any eyes, but it was standing parallel with me. It looked to be staring straight at me. When the light hit it, it turned and walked behind the garage. I can remember how smoothly it moved, like it barely touched the ground. The fear I felt was so strong, I wanted to crawl out of my skin. It was pure terror. I never saw it again though, and haven't felt fear like that since. I ran into the living room and yelled at my dad that I saw Bigfoot. I was a kid and couldn't think of any large humanoid figure aside from that one, and sprinted to my room and locked the door. I couldn't sleep at all that night. I am an adult now, and a few months ago my dad asked me about that night. He said he remembered me telling him I saw Bigfoot, and he went and grabbed his pistol and went out into the yard. He said the dog went out with him, but this time the dog just hid behind my dad the whole time, shaking. He felt uneasy and yelled into the woods that if anyone's out there, they're going to get shot. He said what scared him most was that the dog's reaction was just too weird. He's never seen the dog so terrified. My dad is a teacher and he tells a story to the kids that he teaches, and they usually laugh and think it's made up, and he assures them that it isn't a funny story when I tell it. He told one class the story, and as usual, all were laughing, except one student. They looked scared. This student is full-blooded Choctaw, and they came to my dad after class and said, "That wasn't a Bigfoot, but I know what it was." They wouldn't say its name out loud, but they did say it was a shadow being that's malevolent and dangerous. This happened years and years ago, and I still remember it like it was yesterday, and just thinking about it scares me today as much as it did then. It makes me nervous and uncomfortable at the best of times, and almost makes me have a panic attack at the worst of times. Whatever it was, I won't go near those woods alone, especially at night. When I was around 9 or 10, my little brother and I were spending a couple of nights at our grandparents who lived out on a farm in the middle of nowhere. We woke up really early one morning around 2 a.m. I turned the little night light on and my brother told me to check outside to see how early it looked. When I opened the blinds, the first thing I saw on the porch was a very tall figure. At first, I thought it was my grandfather. So I called his name. The second I called his name, the figure turned around, and its glowing, yellow eyes looked directly at me and my brother who was still in the bed. I looked more carefully, and the more I looked at it, the more I realized it was pretty much a hunched-over, skinny-looking hyena or dog. It leaped back off the porch and into the darkness. About 5 seconds later, we heard it running across the roof, followed by a high-pitched little screech. My brother and I were very scared, and after we calmed down, we decided to write it off as a kangaroo or something. Looking back now though, and being told by my other grandmother that she saw the same thing not too far away from the house, I think it was something much scarier. Maybe a yowie or some sort of dog man, maybe even a hyena man, I don't even know. It's so hard to describe how this thing looked. If any of you guys possibly have any advice or any idea what this thing could have been, and how we can avoid having any more encounters with it, I would very much like any advice. I am a football player and I live in rural Alabama. I am still in high school, but when I first joined junior varsity football, I would hear my name being called from the woods behind the field house, and for a long time I thought nothing of it. Now I am still on the varsity team, and every once in a while I'll be on the sidelines of the practice field, and I will hear branches break and my name called. My name is very unusual for the area that I live in. I am the only person with it at my school, and the voice saying my name is indistinctive from all my friends, so I don't know what it is or who it could be. I have asked my friends if they are messing with me, but they say they don't know what I am talking about. They think I have hearing problems or something. I have gone to the doctor multiple times and they say I have no problem hearing. I don't know what it is, but if anyone does, please let me know. I am 6'3" and I am a lineman. There isn't much I am scared of, but this terrifies me and it still happens to this very day. I'm not sure why it terrifies me either. Maybe it's just because I have no idea what is calling me from those woods. I hear stories of wendigos and skinwalkers and flesh gates and all these things that can mimic voices and call you, but I don't know if any of these things are prevalent in the area I'm from. I am currently in the 9th grade, so I still have 3 years of high school left. I hope and pray these events don't escalate and continue for the rest of my high school days. Please, once again, if any of you guys know anything, comment down below, and thank you, Swamp, for sharing my short story. I know it's not as long as you'd normally like to share, but it's still pretty creepy if I say so myself. My name is Timmy. I grew up in the backwoods of Butler, Kentucky. This is a place where ghost stories were told by the old folks to any kid that would listen. I'm 49 now, so I have my own stories, and here's one of them. There's an old farmhouse in the woods about a mile away from where I grew up. It was always called the Old Walton House. We were always told that it was haunted and you kids need to stay away from there. I had a cousin that was hunting, and he was walking down the dirt road that went by the front porch of the Walton House. There was an old man sitting in a rocking chair smoking a pipe. Danny, at the time, didn't think much of it and kept walking on. When he got back home, he was asking Mama who moved into the Walton House. He described the old man to Mama. Apparently, he described Old Man Walton to a T. Mama told Danny that was Old Man Walton that he had seen, and Danny asked Mama if he had moved back into the old house. She said, "No, honey. He died about 5 years before you were born." Danny drowns 2 weeks later trying to save another kid drowning. That was in 1968. But I don't remember exactly. Now, during my encounter at the Walton House, I was about 15 at the time and my cousin and I would go investigate every ghost story we heard. So the Walton House was of course on the list. It was a Saturday evening and we were all heading to the Walton House. It was a mile walk and we were telling stories that we have heard just to pass time on the walk. Well, we arrived, walked up to the front porch, and the rocking chair was gone. The front door was open, about 6 inches or so. We opened the door and stepped into the living room of the old house. It wasn't long before we all had forgotten about ghost hunting and were reading the old newspapers on the walls that were dated back in the early 1900s. Well, we did that for a while and decided to explore the house. We walked around and saw the door that leads up to the attic. We cautiously opened the door, and we were getting ready to walk up the stairs when someone said there's a cellar door. In the middle of the kitchen floor was a door that leads to the cellar. We opened the door, but we couldn't go downstairs as the stairs had been rotted and laid at the bottom. We decided to move to the next best place, the attic. We walked back over to the attic door, opened it, and there at the top of the stairs stood a pair of bibbed overalls. Strangely, there was no one in them, but they were just standing there at the top of the stairs. The light from the window behind them made it easy to see that the bottom of there were 6 inches off the floor. We slammed the door and got out of there. We all looked up at the stairs again shortly to see that there was nothing there. We still scratch our heads to this day on how those overalls could have been floating, especially since there was nothing hanging them. My name is John, and I'm a teen who lives in Romania. Just to let you know, this is a true story that happened to me and a friend of mine. I want to give you some backstory of my hometown. I live in a small city bordered all around by woods. This is not just a simple city. It is a city that comes with a really creepy background. In World War I, a battle was fought in my city and thousands of lives were lost. After the German takeover, citizens were obligated to give the soldiers all the supplies needed, from cheese to wood. A large part of the people formed a resistance. After that, the Germans started killing people that wouldn't give them food and supplies. In one incident, a man was killed using a big saw. My grandmother's brother witnessed the execution. After the execution's bodies were usually dumped in the nearby woods. When you walk through the forest, you can still find the bones enclosed to this very day. Now let's get back to my story. I am part of a non-profit organization, and we recently had a team building in my hometown. We were about 30 people. We rented an entire motel, and me and a couple of friends rented 2 rooms at another motel in the area. From one motel to the other, the distance was about 2 kilometers. That night, as we were walking on the road, we noticed that there was total silence from the forest. The silence was so deep that the only things that we could hear were our own voices. Normally, the forest isn't that mute. We continued walking down the road and the streetlights were out from the storm from the night before. The only light we had came from our phones. We continued walking, and as we approached a bridge, we saw something strange. Someone was standing in the middle of the bridge. We looked at each other, and when we looked back, the thing had disappeared. We walked to the place where the thing was sitting. We discovered a sharp piece of metal that was old and rusty. We continued walking, but nothing else weird happened. We decided to take a shortcut on a small dirt road. As we were walking, we heard horses running from behind. The noise simply passed us and continued on, but the thing is, there were no horses nearby. We nearly froze from being scared. That said, we were young idiots at the time and decided to continue to walk. We walked a few more 100 meters as we encountered a World War I uniformed soldier. It was like he was so real, he was so solid looking. He charged towards us with a bayonet. I got so scared that I got my knife out and I threw it at him. We didn't wait around and instead decided to run for our lives. From then on, we didn't encounter anything. When we arrived at our rooms, we closed the doors. The motel had a little motion sensor light outside. All night, the light flickered on and off without stopping, and nobody was ever walking by. When I got home the next day, I started researching about my town and I discovered that this area, where we saw the German soldier ghost, a battle in World War I took place. As strange as it all sounds, I still remember this like it happened yesterday, and I think we might have seen some residual energy. This happened tonight while I was jogging with my best friend and my mom. We are 2 females in our late 20s and 1 female in their 50s. My best friend and I like to jog late at night since we live in Florida and it's cooler at night, and there aren't a lot of people out that time. We both just recently started the C25K program, and since we are overnight and shy, we don't want to jog in front of a bunch of people yet. My mom goes with us and she walks while we jog. Tonight there were a few people out there besides us. There was an older lady walking her dog, and a couple of teenage girls who were just walking and talking about nothing really. About 3/4 of the way through our jog, 2 guys showed up. They were probably late teens, early 20s. We only had to pass them once, but we got a weird vibe off of them. The teenage girls probably felt it too because they left shortly after passing them. We were almost done with our cool-down walk when we noticed they were standing up. They were watching us rather intently, and I think one even had binoculars. They were waiting for us to pass by again. We decided to turn around and finish our cool down in the other direction when my mom said she needed to find a bathroom ASAP. We cut our cool down short by 1 minute. As we were leaving, the guys walked up to the parking lot a bit and watched the car drive by. It was rather unsettling. I'm just glad we got out of there when we did. Hopefully, they won't be there next time we go for a run. I know this seems really anticlimactic, but it's just one of those stories where you really had to be there to feel how these guys were looking at us. It's like they were stalking us or something, and I felt like prey. I'm sorry if this isn't good enough to be in a video. And if you do share it, thank you very much, Swamp Dweller. Some time ago, I remember it was a Tuesday night, and I was driving home. I don't remember the exact dates. It was a very dark night, and as I attempted to drive onto the A1 Motorway from Broad Hallway Junction 7, I indicated to leave the slip road when a dark car literally parked beside me. I sensed it was a male, and could not see into the car. Now, I'm on the slip road trying to get onto the motorway. I was going to Letchworth Garden, but with this car parked right next to me, I cannot get on the road. It's blocking me. Unusually, the A1 was rather deserted. I prayed for help, but the car remained next to mine. I sensed it was a male driver and had a strong feeling not to get out of the car. Maybe it was someone playing a joke, but in the area that I'm from in Europe, there are a lot of human trafficking abductions. I decided to drive forward, and so did he. I found this downright chilling. He was blocking every move of me trying to get onto the motorway. If I stopped or tried to speed up, so did he. I was afraid and alone. After a few more terrifying moments, a white van came down the slow lane, where this person parked next to me, and a smaller car was traveling in the lane, so he had to move. Several more vehicles passed in quick succession, and I moved out into the mainstream traffic, taking my time in case he was lying in wait along the motorway. Eventually, I made it home. I never really told anybody about this, and I still wonder what that was all about. But it has remained with me and creeps me out. A lot of people will say this isn't scary, but if you're from Europe, especially the area I am, you'll know how bad human trafficking is actually here. You would know that so many people that get in small situations like this end up losing their life to slavery, pretty much. Thank you very much for sharing my story. I am 24 now. I am a female and have moved around a lot with my family as my dad was military. At the time, my family and I were living in Virginia, near the historic Triangle area. We lived on a military base that had a lot of wooded land with a few roads through it for people to bike on and for the standard military stuff. My family, some friends, and I would bike on these roads often. It was very relaxing, and as we traveled in a group, we weren't worried about coyotes or bears or anything. However, we kids were told very sternly to never go back on those roads without a parent, and to never, ever split from the group when biking. My best friend at the time and I chalked it up to them being afraid of us being hurt by hunters. The base often allowed hunters into the area to help take care of the crazy deer population, or to keep us away in case the military was doing their thing back there. As you can imagine, since I'm sharing this on the show, we were wrong. Though she didn't get hunted, we were on one of our bike rides, about 3 families all in our group. My best friend and I started lagging behind, and eventually we were at the back of the group. As we rounded a corner, I kid you not, a snake fell from the tree branches above onto my handlebars. I naturally wrecked and freaked out, refusing to get back on my bike. I know, temper tantrum of the century. My friend laughed and just rode off, like a traitor. I stood there staring at my bike and then down the road and back to my bike. I wasn't getting back on that thing and basically said screw it, I'm walking back as we weren't too far in. I knew the roads very well, even the gravel ones, because my dad would drive me around back there in his Jeep. So I was confident as I walked down the road and turned down a dirt road. As I'm walking down this road, I start hearing rustling behind me. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just a rabbit since we had seen quite a few on the ride. The rustling grew closer, and then was past me and to the front of me. Then it stopped. I stopped and decided to bark at it to scare it off. Branches snapped in response. I screamed and took off running. Classically, I ran in the direction of home, which was right by this thing. As I'm running, I hear a growl, but it wasn't like a dog growl. It was deeper, but I'm not sure how to describe this. It was like there was more than one growl, multiple pitches all rolled into one, and it was chilling. I ran like my life depended on it, and this thing was keeping pace with me. Branches snapped and leaves rustling, but still deep enough in the woods that I couldn't make out what it was. The road curved sharply to the left, and my feet slid out from under me. As I tried to take the turn, I ended up eating crap and busted myself up. I ended up sliding off the road into a little ditch before the woods began. I'd say it was a 3-foot grassy area off the road. As I scrambled to my feet, pretty sure I was crying. The thing growls, and the growl soon turned into what sounded like a laugh. I bolted. I ran, but didn't feel like I was getting any closer to home. After the curve, I should have seen the main road, but I didn't see anything. Off to the left before the main road, there would be a little ruin of sorts. My frantic mind thought if maybe I could get to the ruin, I would be safe. The thing was crashing through the woods on my right. I saw my life flash before my eyes. I saw the ruins, and I could have laughed in relief, had the thing not been chuckling again. I could hear it starting to move in, and I jumped/dived into the foundation of the ruin. It was 4 walls with an open doorway that I ran into. I don't know why I thought I would be safe there, but I think it to this day. I would have never made it home. I was much too tired. The thing was just toying with me and would have soon moved in. As it was, as I turned around the dirt and looked back to the doorway, I saw fur. Not the brown or red of coyotes. It was black and wiry looking. I didn't see a face, just fur, and these mangled looking legs. The joints didn't look right. They were like the normal dog legs, but the joints were backwards. I would have thought it was going the other direction, but it was clearly moving to the right when the legs were bent like it was going to the left. It growled. It sounded meaner than in the other earlier growls that I had heard. I expected it to turn around and charge through the doorway at any minute, but it just circled the ruin before going back off into the woods. I didn't leave the ruin until a base police officer found me. She looked terrified. My dad recently told me that she had seen hoof prints, like some weird goat or wolf hybrid. She also heard laughter behind her as she grabbed me and practically threw me into her truck. We didn't speak until we reached my house, where my parents were waiting to hug me and yell at me. I didn't tell them what chased me, but when my dad told me years later what the officer saw, I finally told him. I don't know what it was. The deformed legs make me think of Skinwalker. Every time we went riding after that, I would hear growling and catch glimpses of black fur in the woods. I don't know what it was, but I know for sure that it was hunting me. One thing I still don't know is why it didn't come into the ruin after me. Maybe it was some sort of protection. Thanks for listening to these creepy, allegedly true stories that came from the middle of nowhere. These were honestly some pretty interesting stories. Some of them were just downright strange, and others were definitely spine-chillingly creepy. As always, if you enjoyed these stories, please hit that like button, as it helps me out a ton. If you're new to the channel, subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss a new video. I upload them almost every single day on all things natural and supernatural. If you have a story you would like to submit to hear on a future video, be sure to do so at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. It's stories like yours that keep these videos going, and I would love to share them with everyone here in the swamp. If you didn't know, you can download Swamp Dweller Scary Stories on iTunes, Spotify, and every other major podcast provider. If you guys made it all the way to the end of this video, let me know by commenting "Dancing Wendigo" to confuse everybody. I'll see you guys soon with another creepy video.